In 2011, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker signed Act 10, which was a bill that decimated public employee unions, especially teachers. The promise was that it would revitalize the state's economy and help it grow faster. What has really happened? Well, the result has been slower economic growth, worse educational results, and greater inequality. Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post something new. So the argument by conservatives is that unions stand in the way of economic growth and so do higher taxes. Well, we have an opportunity to see the effect of that in Wisconsin, thanks to Governor Scott Walker, who became a hero of the conservative movement by passing his legislation decimating unions across the state. The promise of this legislation, of course, is that getting rid of unions and lowering taxes will be rocket fuel for the economy, as Trump put it, and it will result in greater economic growth and greater investment. Well, what happened in Wisconsin? Well, between 2009 and 2019, Wisconsin's GDP grew by 42.3%. And as always, I'll post links to the articles that document this down below. Now, that 42.3% sounds like a lot, except when you can compare it to the rest of the United States, which grew by 48.3%, a full 6 points faster. And the Great Lakes region, which includes my home state of Michigan as well as Wisconsin, grew during that period by 42.6%, a full 0.3% faster. And Minnesota, which is right next door to Wisconsin, grew by 47.3%, a full 5 points faster than Wisconsin during that period. So the reality is, when you compare Wisconsin to other states in similar circumstances, Wisconsin did not fare as well as the states that did not decimate their public employees through this kind of legislation. What are the positive results that they point to? Well, it is true that local governments have fared a little better because they've been able to pay less to their public employees. And in some cases, property taxes have dropped slightly. Generally no more than a couple cents per person, but still something. But who's paying for that? Well, it's basically being paid for by teachers and other educators. And the result has been greater turnover of teachers and fewer young people going into teaching in Wisconsin than in the past. And what's more is it's exacerbated inequality between school districts, where now you're seeing even greater racial inequality between the poor districts and the wealthier districts, which are able to recruit the few teachers who've decided to stay in the field. But who are the real winners in this? As usual, it's the very wealthy. They're the ones who have the very expensive property, where the cut in property taxes might actually mean more than a couple cents. They're also the ones who benefit when labor is able to be pushed to work at lower cost than what is a living wage for most people. You see, you and I really don't benefit from this type of legislation, but the very wealthy do. And in the long run, we're hurt by it. Perhaps the strongest relationship that explains the increase in inequality in the United States has been the drop in union power. It's almost a direct one-to-one relationship. As unions have lost membership and lost power, inequality in the United States has increased. And guess what? That's exactly what the wealthy want. Ironically, even if you aren't a member of a union, you still benefit from the union being present because of the fact that they push up wages overall, so other non-union employers and non-union industries are forced to pay more and give better benefits to their employees so that the union doesn't come over into their industry or their place of employment either. The reality is that the middle class in America was basically built up on the back of unions. And the fact that the middle class in America is struggling can be traced almost directly back to the fact that unions have been so emasculated in this country. So why was this type of legislation so important to Scott Walker and his fellow conservatives? Well, the truth is that one of the few areas left in the United States that has still some relatively strong unions is in the public sector. The private sector has been decimated, where now approximately 5% of employees are members of unions. Basically, the last remaining stronghold of unions is in the public sector. So that's what the conservatives and the wealthy have targeted, because unions are going to stand in way of their effort to completely take over the country. It's easy for politicians like Scott Walker to point to teachers and say, look how much money they're earning and the benefits they get. Don't you wish you could get that? And guess what? They'd be right. But the solution to that problem shouldn't be then cutting the pay of the others. The solution to the problem should be giving you that benefit and you that pay as well. I've never understood this attitude that we have, that we want to race each other to the bottom. Instead, we should all be trying to work together to improve everybody's circumstances. Because what the wealthy have done by dividing us against ourselves is make it so that everybody ends up doing worse except for them. The reality is, if we want to improve the financial situation for governments as well as for the people who live in the country, the solution is not to cut a couple pennies off their taxes. The solution is to make the wealthy pay their fair share and to re-empower unions so that they can stand up for everybody except for the extremely wealthy. Now, interestingly enough, there is legislation in Congress right now called the PRO Act that would help re-empower unions a little bit in the private sector, essentially shifting some of the power back from employers who really have taken the strength away from the unions over the past few years. I will be the first to agree with you that unions are not perfect, but any institution that involves people is not going to be perfect. And unions do have a history of racism and sexism, but I think it's worthy of note that the new president of the AFL-CIO is a woman. We need to stop buying into this rhetoric that is being spewed by the right and the conservatives and the very wealthy that convinces us somehow to fight among ourselves over the scraps that are left. By all of us working together and recognizing our common cause as workers, we will all be able to do better. And that's really what the wealthy are very scared of. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me, I'd love to hear your comments down below. And if you could like this video and maybe subscribe to this channel, that'd be a huge help. I'll see you in the next video. And in the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.